Hello, and welcome to Disaster Pedagogy, the classroom at the end of the world. My name is Heather Ringo. My pronouns are she or her. I'm an English PhD student at UC Davis studying the environmental humanities. I'm also adjunct faculty at Solano Community College. I've taught writing and literature for the past 10 years, except for a brief interlude working as a naturalist for Sonoma County Regional Parks. Before we begin this presentation, we should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which Solano Community College was built. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of the Patwin-Sasunas people. There are currently 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: the Cashel-Dihi Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, the Quetzal-Dihi Wintun Nation, and the Yosha-Dihi Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. Further, as a self-identified invasive species on this land, I firmly believe that if we really care about the environment and taking action to mitigate the effects of catastrophic natural disaster, we need to return lands back to these original stewards. This includes supporting Indigenous cultural practices like controlled burns. Disaster pedagogy is just one tool in the toolbox in what must be a multifaceted approach. I'm about to show video depicting potentially triggering natural disaster imagery from the 2017 Santa Rosa wildfires. Please check the video description for links to the presentation transcript, this PowerPoint slideshow, and works cited page. It was still dark when I woke coughing to the acrid stench of campfire, to the frantic text messages from my first responder husband. He was asking if our house was experiencing fire issues. By that afternoon, the Atlas fire burned within a few miles of our Solano County home, and I evacuated with our dogs as my husband evacuated people in Santa Rosa. Meanwhile, Solano Community College, where I now work and where he was attending school, functioned as an evacuation shelter. This is not a video from my husband's patrol car, but it's comparable to the conditions he faced. He was forced to work 15 days straight. Before the fires struck, he was just a few units away from completing his associate's degree. He had straight A's in all of his classes, but he had to drop all his classes due to the fires, not because he was incapable of completing the work, but because the course policies demanded he physically attend classes. What if his instructors had flexible deadlines? What if they had offered asynchronous learning options like we've been offering for the past year? In short, what if his instructors had taught like the world was on fire? Bigger, hotter, more frequent, more destructive, more disruptive, the Anthropocene, Thulacene, Capitolocene, Plantation scene, Manthropocene, whatever you want to call it, it is a crisis. Amidst our crisis, students tell us they still would like to keep learning. They also tell us they need help to do so. And we collectively tell them, whether directly or through the way we structure education, that if they fail, it's their fault. Sorry, we shrug. File for pass, no pass. File for an incomplete. Take a break from school and go get help. Come back when times are better. This is absolute rubbish. For most of our students, there will not be a better time. Our climate crisis will not get better anytime soon. The world is not getting better, but we can be better. As stewards of the planet, yes, but also as educators. That's where disaster pedagogy comes in. This approach entangles existing best practices from teaching for equity, trauma-informed teaching, and hybrid pedagogy with Anna Tsing's The Mushroom at the End of the World to reimagine emergent learning in the wake of disruption and destruction. To imagine ways students, like my husband, can still succeed in precarious times. In many ways, my husband won the privilege lottery. Blue collar and a disabled veteran, yes, but also white, male, cisgender, and, this is crucial, married to an adjunct professor, an insider who knows the system and tried to guide him through it, like Virgil guiding Dante through the 9 circles of hell. At the time, I was also enrolled in community college classes to acquire my natural resource management certification. Like my husband, I had all A's, but like my husband, I had to drop all my classes because the roads I used to commute to school were ravaged by fire, blocked by CAL FIRE trucks, the yellow center line paint melted. My PTSD and asthma were so exacerbated by the fires, I could barely take care of myself, let alone complete coursework. If my and my husband's educational aspirations, greased by relative privilege, were so derailed by disaster, how does this bode for more marginalized students? The data overwhelmingly tells us, not well. Environmental humanities uses the word sacrifice zones to describe the landscapes where we as a society are willing to let environmental destruction pile up so we can keep our creature comforts. Similarly, Black, brown, indigenous, disabled, and impoverished bodies bear the brunt of disaster, anthropogenic and otherwise. While sacrifice zones apply to the natural environment, I would argue higher education functions as a kind of sacrifice zone. The groups most harmed by pollution and disaster largely overlap with those we disproportionately fail as educators. I'm not saying correlation equals causation here. That's an argument outside of the scope of this presentation. What I am saying is we need to do better, not only as the most destructive force in our collective ecosystem, but as members of the educational ecotone where culture meets environment. Just as the best time to take action against climate change was yesterday, and the second best time is today, so too must we take immediate action to better serve our students. Equitable education is environmentalism. It is climate justice. Our students are our future. Disaster pedagogy is one way we might approach that future. Not so much as groundbreaking approach, but as a targeted leveraging of existing equitable learning praxis to mitigate disaster-caused disruption. When the fire comes, will you be prepared? How will you support your students? Well, the fire is already here. And if it's not where you are yet, it's coming soon. We need to think with intention about how our teaching practices and policies adapt alongside climate change and how environmental destruction seeps, floods, and burns into our classroom. This approach draws upon resilient pedagogy, reality pedagogy, hybrid pedagogy, teaching for equity, universal design for learning, and trauma-informed pedagogy. While many of these frameworks touch upon disaster and climate change, none focus solely on the educational challenges posed by these problems. By interfacing critical pedagogies with our environmental humanities, we might find ways to adapt higher education to survive our catastrophic times. Anna Tsing's The Mushroom at the End of the World, an interdisciplinary economics, ethnology, ecology expose on the Matsutake mushroom, may seem a strange habitat to forage for pedagogical wisdom. And yet this text teaches us to pay close attention to our environment, to perform close reading in the language of literary studies, and perhaps open ourselves to nourishment from unsuspecting places. The Matsutake mushroom is a species which is adapted to thrive in patchy places, those damaged by anthropogenic destruction. Its entanglement with nature and culture enables emergent multi-species benefits. How can we so cultivate emergent learning in our students? How can we harness the metaphorical might of the Matsutake and other species that evolved to thrive in sites of disturbance? I'm going to talk a little bit about an emergent outcome from this pandemic. One would think student success and retention would tank during times of disaster. Indeed, in many educational ecosystems, it did. However, when I observed the Solano Community College data, surprisingly, across the board, coinciding with the spring 2020 shift to online learning precipitated by COVID-19, success and retention rates increased, in many cases drastically, 5 to 10%, as opposed to the 2 to 3% that had been the norm for the past 20 years. This shift was even more pronounced in the majority of traditionally underserved populations. Why? I replicated this data crunch across multiple demographics and across Solano Community College and California Community College data more generally, and found consistent results across the board. Retention and success rates improved in a significant way, coinciding with the shift to pandemic and online learning. While the data for 2021 is not available yet, this is also supported by my anecdotal experiences teaching during the pandemic using critical pedagogy frameworks. I have a hypothesis that these improved retention and success rates are due to the flexibility provided by massively available remote learning And perhaps more importantly, the fact Solano Community College forced all faculty to complete online accessibility training, and the increased emphasis on equity. These are all things we should be offering all the time. How can we keep this momentum as the pandemic subsides? How can we replicate the success across campuses? I'll give you a hint. We can't return to normal. Normal was not working. Instead, we can emulate the qualities that enable Matsutake to thrive at the edge of precarity, to bloom like our students in sacrifice zones. The Matsutake mushroom has 3 qualities that I think that we can replicate in an educational context. First, adaptation. According to Tsing, quote, fungi keep growing and changing all their lives, end quote, to suit the many diverse habitats they call home. So too must educators be able to react quickly to changing physical and educational climates. Flexibility. Matsutake interact in different ways with different ecosystems and species, often in mutually beneficial mycorrhizal assemblages. So too must educators work with students to listen to their needs, to co-create symbiotic relationships, symbiotic learning environments, to adapt to the educational context. The open-ended entangled relationships will work together to produce emergent outcomes, what Tsing calls, quote, polyphonic assemblages. Redundancy. Just as mushrooms are part of the backup, a kind of backup interwoven network of hydration and nutrient exchange with forests, and just as CAL FIRE encourages Californians to have a map with at least 2 evacuation routes planned in case one becomes impassable, so too do students benefit from redundancies in resources and routes to learning through precarious and catastrophic conditions. These 3 concepts put into practice cultivate a learning ecosystem of emergence. So, what might disaster pedagogy look like in practice? This is where I might lose some of you because it's going to look like a lot of extra work for not a lot of extra pay when we're already all overwhelmed. And it is, you're right. And it's going to go against a lot of what has been drilled into us in teaching culture. It also might grate with your department policies, but bear with me because I have good reason for these suggestions. I also want to emphasize that this is less prescriptive than speculative. The entire principle behind disaster pedagogy is that you'll need to adapt to your unique ecosystem, your discipline, your climate, your disaster status, your campus culture, and your students' needs. These are just some ways that have worked for me and my students as both a writing and literature instructor and a disabled student and disaster survivor myself. First, we should offer online asynchronous options in all face-to-face classes so students can keep learning even when the world is burning. We should be prepared to shift purely to the online modality if and when disaster strikes and shutters campus. This option allows students to study and review material to prepare for exams and essays. Disabled students who are immunocompromised and not completely protected by vaccination can learn from the safety of home. Those with mobility issues do not have to navigate physically inaccessible spaces on campus. Neurodivergent students and those with mental health struggles can engage with material without having to navigate social and emotional distractions. Marginalized students can avoid the microaggressions and safety concerns of physical spaces. On the environmental front, this will decrease commute times to reduce vehicular CO2 emissions. Note that allowing students to choose from face-to-face and online options enables those students who do not thrive in online spaces to still get their needs met. Is it a lot of work? Yes, but I've actually been teaching this way since pre-pandemic times, and I've enjoyed the benefits of it. I would argue it actually reduces work in the long term and, more importantly, increases accessibility. I upload my entire course before the class starts. This saves me time. When students miss class, they know they can find what they missed online rather than hounding me with, "Did I miss anything important?" emails. I don't have to juggle or keep track of student excused absences or be the judge of whether a sick cat or hangover or distant cousin's death warrants an excused absence. Students in my class cited the fact that they were already comfortable using the course Canvas to enable their transition online when we were forced to shift online for COVID. Finally, I would argue that for many instructors, you already did the work. You already created so many online learning materials in the past year. Why not repurpose them as alternate remote options for your face-to-face classes? Second, flexible attendance policies. I used to have extremely strict attendance policies. I would drop students if they missed more than the number of absences allotted by the student handbook. I gave a 10% bonus for perfect attendance. That way, I felt, I had equal parts carrot to equal parts stick. My fear was that if I didn't require attendance, students wouldn't show up and they would miss crucial material. However, shifting to flexible attendance did not result in lower attendance rates. I had a couple students who didn't show up at all and instead completed their remote assignments. I had a couple that showed up maybe 70 to 80% of the time, but the vast majority only missed 0 to 1 classes. My attendance rates did not change. Even better, students who would have been filtered out by strict attendance policies were able to stay in the class and most of the time succeed. Related to this is flexible deadlines. You can quote me on this. Deadlines and disasters do not mix. To use the language of ecology, they are allelopathic. Disasters are toxic to strict timelines as much as strict deadlines are toxic to student mental health when traumatic circumstances outside the student's control prevent them from meeting them. Won't flexible deadlines mean students fall behind and I'll get a deluge of late assignments? That was my concern too. But to my surprise, just as with attendance, there was no measurable difference between when I had strict late policies, flexible late policies, and zero penalty late policies. What I did have was some of the most vulnerable students persist and succeed who would have otherwise been forced to drop or fail. While I have not collected hard data on this, when speaking with other educators who opted for flexible deadlines, they reported similar surprising benefits and said they would, quote, never go back to inflexible deadlines. Finally, resource repetition. Providing timely reminders connecting students to resources such as assistance, housing assistance, food pantry, and mental health care. For example, I include a list of resources on my syllabus. I link to specific resources at times when they're most likely to be useful. For example, on every writing assignment, I provide a link to our campus writing center. When traumatic events happen, I link to campus and community mental health resources. It has always been important that we acknowledge our students as human beings with lives outside the classroom, and that we care about more than their performance in our class. Now that life and death scenarios are increasingly knocking on our front door, sometimes literally, like during the wildfires, it's of vital importance that we work to help students get the resources they need to survive, so in our classrooms, they can thrive. As I speak now, we're sweating through another record-breaking heat wave here in Solano County. That I might lose power is a real concern during the creation of this presentation. And in fact, I've had to record it 5 or 6 times because my internet kept cutting out, possibly due to the heat wave. Fires are burning across the West. We're in a record-breaking drought. The power grid is strained nearly to the point of collapse in Texas. The pandemic still kills thousands of people per day, despite our proclamations that the pandemic is over. Our students are hurting. And I'm sorry to say we are often contributing to their suffering by holding them to Holocene era expectations. They are no longer working in the stable conditions that most of us were privileged enough to enjoy. My undergraduate education was never interrupted by deadly pandemic, smoke risk, or evacuations. I'm not exaggerating when I say our students have grappled with one or more of these challenges every semester since 2017. Education systems simply cannot function as normal given our abnormal conditions. Like the Matsutake, we must adapt if we want to survive. We must learn to thrive in the age of precarity. Perhaps we should look to our students to show us the way. My husband this summer, after 8 years, finally completes his associate degree. Through several more wildfires, one burning within a few hundred yards of our house, power outages, the pandemic, he completed those classes remotely that his teachers' attendance and late assignment policies would not let him complete in 2017. This is not due to him becoming a better student. Don't tell him I said that. But solely because in 2020, his teachers adapted to teach like the world was on fire. And while I use him as an anecdotal example, the data bears out my argument that disaster pedagogy benefits all students. Teaching and learning in the Anthropocene is a challenge, but it's not impossible. It requires imagination and flexibility. We can stay stuck in our teaching rut, forcing ourselves and our students to slog through hours of Zoom meetings and unrealistic expectations of productivity. Or we can teach like we care. As Chris Emdin says, we can teach like the world is on fire. Because it is. Thank you.